Hi, I'm here from a tree nursery in Western Australia. When people get into bonsai for the first time, they usually don't realize just how much fertilizing is going to be required to keep their trees happy. And the reason for that is because bonsai grow in small containers. A lot of these trees have had their root systems pruned so that they are growing in a smaller container than they would naturally grow in. And because they are in that smaller container, they have less access to nutrients. So you will need to supply those nutrients for them or else they won't grow well. Now, obviously, when a tree is growing out in nature, it has access to a large area where it can spread its roots and gather nutrients from all around that area. And sometimes those nutrients are actually supplied by other plants, other organisms that live around it, things like fungi and bacteria. Those are all things that the tree is able to take advantage of when it's growing out in nature. But when you bring that tree into a pot and grow it as a bonsai, you remove all of those advantages. You remove the access to a big soil profile. You remove all of those natural relationships with other organisms that might help supply the tree with nutrients. So therefore, it becomes your job to make sure that those nutrients are supplied. If we look at a plant growing out in nature, there's a few different ways that it can gain nutrients. It can gain them through the soil by sending out roots and accessing those nutrients, either from decaying organic matter or rocks that are weathering away and releasing nutrients into the soil. Another way that a tree gains nutrients is through its leaves. Now, obviously, all plants photosynthesize, so they gain energy through their leaves. That process is called photosynthesis. And then they're also able to absorb some nutrients through those leaves. However, the main way that most plants gain their nutrients is through their roots. And that's what we'll be focusing on today. I've already mentioned that trees grown in small containers require more frequent fertilizing than trees grown in larger containers. The question is, what is fertilizer? Fertilizer is basically any substance that contains nutrients that plants need to grow. There are three main nutrients that plants need. These are known as macronutrients: nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. If you go down to your local garden section, you'll find lots of fertilizers that contain these three nutrients. They might even be labeled as NPK fertilizers, where the numbers on the label refer to the percentage of each of these three nutrients that are contained in that fertilizer. So if it's an NPK of 10, 10, 10, that means that 10% of the fertilizer is made up of each of those three nutrients. Now, the amount of each of these nutrients that a plant needs depends on many factors. For example, younger, actively growing parts of the plant, like these new leaves, will require more nitrogen than older, more mature parts of the plant. And of course, a young tree will require more nitrogen than an old tree because it's growing more. Also, the growing season will affect how much nitrogen is required. During spring and summer, when trees are actively growing, they'll require more nitrogen than during autumn and winter when they are dormant. Another factor is the species of the tree. Some trees require more nitrogen than others. For example, pines seem to require a bit more nitrogen than most other types of trees. In general, the type of fertilizer that you use will also affect how much of each nutrient is taken up by the plant. Some fertilizers are designed to release their nutrients very quickly and are used for a short-term boost. Others are designed to release their nutrients slowly over a long period of time. So now we know what fertilizer is and what nutrients are required. The next question is how to fertilize. As I said before, when trees are growing in small containers, they require more frequent fertilizing than trees growing in larger containers. How often exactly? Well, that again depends on many factors such as the species of tree, the age of the tree, the growing season, and the fertilizer used. However, as a general rule, during the growing season, which for most of us will be from spring through to fall, you should be applying fertilizer to your bonsai approximately every 2 to 4 weeks. It is better to apply a little bit of fertilizer more frequently than to apply a lot of fertilizer all at once. If you give your tree too much fertilizer, the roots may end up burning and killing the tree. This is especially true if you water the tree after applying the fertilizer. If the fertilizer comes into contact with the roots while it's still in its concentrated form, it can burn the roots. So it's best to water your trees before you fertilize them. Another thing you'll all notice when reading fertilizer instructions is that they will recommend that you thoroughly water your plant before fertilizing. The reason they say this is not because they want you to flush out any excess fertilizer that has built up in the soil from previous applications. The real reason is because you need to water the tree thoroughly before fertilizing it so that the fertilizer can reach the roots. If you fertilize dry soil, the fertilizer will sit on top of the soil and just melt away. It'll eventually get washed away by rain or watering and end up polluting waterways and maybe harming wildlife along the way. Instead, you should water the soil thoroughly before applying fertilizer. Then the fertilizer will dissolve in the water and reach the roots. If you're not sure how much fertilizer to apply, always err on the side of too little rather than too much. It's really easy to apply more fertilizer if you need to, but it's really hard to reverse the damage caused by too much fertilizer. If you think you've applied too much fertilizer, stop fertilizing immediately and start watering your tree regularly. New growth will probably be stunted, but after a couple of months, the tree should recover. Now, how do you know if your tree has a deficiency of any of those main nutrients? Each nutrient has a unique role in the tree, and each one will cause specific problems if there isn't enough of it. I'll go through each nutrient and talk about what it does and what will happen if there isn't enough of it. Nitrogen is important for the production of chlorophyll, which is the substance that gives leaves their green color. It's also important for general growth and development. A nitrogen deficiency causes leaves to turn yellow, starting with the oldest leaves first. This is known as chlorosis. Eventually, if the tree doesn't get enough nitrogen, it will die. Phosphorus is important for root development and flowering and fruiting. A phosphorus deficiency usually causes leaves to turn purple or reddish in color. If the tree doesn't get enough phosphorus, it will become stunted and the buds may not open. Potassium is important for water regulation within the plant. It also helps the tree resist diseases and pests. A potassium deficiency causes the leaves to turn brown starting at the tips and the edges of the leaf. As the deficiency becomes more severe, more and more leaves turn brown and eventually the tree dies. So that was a quick summary of how to fertilize your bonsai. Remember, trees grown in small containers require more frequent fertilizing than trees grown in larger containers. During the growing season, which for most of us will be from spring through to fall, you should be applying fertilizer to your bonsai approximately every 2 to 4 weeks. It is better to apply a little bit of fertilizer more frequently than to apply a lot of fertilizer all at once. Don't forget to give your tree a good watering before you fertilize it, and always fertilize according to the instructions on the packet. Thanks for watching. Hopefully you found this useful. If you did, please hit the thumbs up button below. And if you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe.